We are live here. On this Thursday afternoon, huh? January 29th, 2026. House Transportation Committee picking up on budget and review of the Agency of Transportation's budget. And this is the next piece. And Andrea Wright is a returning presenter here in the committee. Welcome back. And I guess prepare for all kinds of questions to run through your budget.
Pretty short presentations though.
Yeah, there's sometimes there's lots and sometimes there's not. So please, whenever you're ready, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Andrea Wright. I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at the Agency of Transportation. Also with me here today is Hillary Delrosh. She's our Sustainability and Innovations Project Manager and is here to answer any questions that come up that I might not be able to answer for the budget, but also for our next presentation on our electric vehicle infrastructure. So really, before I get into the numbers, I just want to sort of ground you all again in the purpose of the Environmental Policy Sustainability Program. The program supports the agency in all cross-cutting aspects of transportation and environment. Certainly, really, as we have formed as a program, we have a major focus on climate initiatives as the agency looks to implement the federal funding that we've had over the past 5 years through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. We've got the climate reduction program, the carbon reduction program, Resilience Protect programs, and of course the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And really that is, that's been our real main focus for us, but also in implementing the actions from the Climate Action Plan and the Comprehensive Energy Plan. We also support Vermont Emergency Management, where the state has a mitigation plan, and we're supporting the Treasurer's Office and the Climate Action Office and the Resilience Implementation Strategy. So really just interagency coordination and understanding sort of the regulatory environment, needs of the agency around environment and climate, and then codifying good practice and policy, and then understanding what funding is needed and where we seeking ways to fund different initiatives that we have. So that's us in a nutshell.
Representative Pouch.
Hi. Are you going to talk about? My question is going to be: is there any specific high-level goals in the Climate Action Plan specific for transportation? Are you going to talk to that at all? Or?
I won't talk specifically too much about that in this budget presentation. We'll definitely touch on it more in the electric vehicle infrastructure, but yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Representative Coy.
So did you say you're working with the Treasurer's Office on what?
We
Particular one of these?
it's just we support different initiatives that come out of state government. The Climate Action Office and the Treasurer's Office really were spearheaded the Resilience Implementation Strategy.
Okay.
So we supported the transportation aspects of that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this, I just wanted to also spend a little bit of time. Obviously, 2025 was quite turbulent for the federal government and understanding what was happening at that level. But we were able to move forward with several different initiatives. We contracted for the construction of 8 additional NEVI charging infrastructure locations. So bringing that total to 9 with the Bradford site that we got going a couple of years ago. And we were able to obligate the full $21.2 million available to us, which is great. We're one of 4 states that were able to obligate all of our NEVI funds so far. And that has some ramifications with some new proposals that are coming through the federal level. We'll talk much more about the NEVI program in the next presentation. You've been hearing from Patrick Murphy a little bit, and probably we'll hear a lot more on the mileage-based user fee as that gets going, but contracted with a consultant for the development and implementation of that. I have it listed here, even though Patrick is spearheading that and he's not part of environmental policy and sustainability anymore. We carried some of that in our past budget, so I wanted to include that in here as well. We have allocated an additional $8 million of the carbon reduction program funds, totaling about $27 million of the available $32 million in that program. If you recall, that goes to bike ped projects, transit operations, electrification within transit, within our own fleets, park and ride facilities and other traffic efficiency types of projects. I have a slide. We can talk more about that later on in the presentation. In terms of resilience, we contracted for the design of 2 hazard mitigation grant award locations. So we'll have the design and construction of those in state fiscal year 27. And we also had some state transportation innovation money that we had we hired a consultant to do nature-based solutions, sort of incorporating nature-based solutions into our projects a little bit more than we are accustomed to doing, and figuring out where those would be applicable. So we're working on that. And then we also allocated the remaining $8.5 million of the Protect funds, the total $37 million for that pot of money.
Can you refresh my memory? Where are the 2 hazard mitigation award locations?
Yes, we are doing one project along Vermont 117 in Jericho. It's a sort of a nature-based solutions. It's a floodplain stabilization project with what's called an engineered log jam. So it's bringing in nature, but it's also using a traditional reinforcement with stone fill. So that is in Jericho. And then the other one is culvert upsizing in Smuggler's Notch.
Great.
Because we
Thank
had
you.
some repeated washouts there.
Thank you.
And then, of course, our incentive programs, they wrapped up last year. We had funding for a couple more programs. Not all the programs had funding last year, but we will be submitting the annual report that is due for that towards the end of the week. That's due by January 31st. So you'll see that coming your way soon, and happy to come in and talk more about sort of how that program closed out, if that is the desire of the committee. And so then getting into the numbers, and it's kind of a lot on here. Hopefully you can see it with clarity. For electric vehicle charging infrastructure, this shows NEVI that we expect to deploy close to 10 million during state fiscal year 27. That will include wrapping up some of the current projects, those 8 projects that I mentioned that we have under contract, as well as early expenditures for the second round solicitation, the projects that might come from that. It includes program oversight and third party. We have a third party consultant inspection and support for that. So those funds cover those expenses. The transportation fund amount shown there is state match only for our staff time and construction oversight, and not for the project construction, because if you recall, we require the private vendors to provide that match, and that's where that 2.3 million in the local column is from with that line item. We've got carbon reduction program oversight. That's, again, staff time for the oversight, as well as federal funds that we have budgeted for fleet electrification. We're doing electric vehicle charging at our district facilities. The match shown in the transportation fund there, it looks a little wonky because it's low compared to what the carbon reduction program would require. It's an 80-20 match. And we will need to utilize state fiscal year 26 carry forward funds for the majority of that needed match. Candace has promised me that that will be available for those purposes. Let's see. The Protect oversight, again, is for staff time for the oversight of that program, but we also, in this line item in our budget, carry the remaining portion of with Protect. There's a required 2%, at least 2% has to go to planning. And so we carry that in our budget too. And that will, that remaining amount there will bring us to the full 2%. The program for hazard mitigation, we have, again, the 2 projects that I mentioned. We need to provide for staff time to administer those. So that's that small line item in the VEN match. There's a chance that we might have FEMA reimbursement for that, but if not, it has to be covered in state funds, and we haven't heard about that yet. So we carry it here in state funds. And then the VEM interdepartment transfer includes 90% for the anticipated construction costs of those projects this year, or in state fiscal year 27. That's 90%, and then we chip in 5%, and we have a local partner that chips in 5% as well. And then those last 2 are just planning funds that we get from Federal Highway. One of them is for more of the general environmental topics that we partner and support other environmental groups within the agency and outside of our agency. Things like when we have to do policy evaluation on Act 250, road ecology, the pollinators. I think you heard from one of my colleagues yesterday on that. Things like contaminated soils, water quality, sort of the more general topics of environment and transportation that we come across. And the last one, again, excuse me, planning and just research for interagency coordination around carbon reduction and resilience. So that is sort of the overview of our budget. Happy to take any questions on that, or we can keep spinning.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, so additional 8 million of carbon reduction program, total allocation 27 million. So that's, the 8 million is part of the 27 million, correct?
Yes.
And, but then what I'm confused about is you go to the funding source for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. It's only 9.9 million.
Two different programs. Carbon reduction is different than the electric charging infrastructure. That's the NEVI.
So the 9.9 is the NEVI,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then, so that's a total of 12. And then the carbon reduction is a total of 579,000. I'm just wondering, where's the
8 million?
The 27.
Yeah, so it's a little confusing because our program oversees those funds, but they come through in other programs. And I have a slide on where those allocations have gone to. So it could go to the transit program, the roadway program, different programs. So that shows up. I don't know that in their presentations if it's showing up as carbon reduction program funds necessarily. I know Ross talked about the carbon reduction program funds in his presentation. I'm not sure if other programs are doing that, but we are using carbon reduction program funds in other projects.
So is the 9.9 million? Yeah, 9.9 million for the charging.
Yeah.
How many chargers is that? Is that going to pay for the 8 chargers?
Yes. And so it's covering, because we're in different state fiscal years, we have some money now allocated from our last budget year for those 8 that are currently under contract for state fiscal year 26. And then we will go out for a second solicitation for additional projects beyond those 8 or 9 that we have.
So you mean you'll have some money left over?
Yes.
Next budget cycle.
Yeah, and we will get all into that.
I see. So all the full 27 million will go to the chargers, or the full 19
21 million of NEVI funds will go to charging. And I have an individual slide for each,
All right.
each
I
program.
was just confused.
Yeah, it can be confusing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you think that that's gonna be going out to bid, right?
Yes,
Soon?
yes, we have to get our paperwork together, but we hope to go, it will be this spring that we go out with the second solicitation.
Okay. And then typically how long does it take to, depends on,
Hopefully we'd have those under contract by maybe fall and then start working on those projects probably in the next spring.
is it likely that you'll have a whole bunch of different people accepting the contract? Or
Different
you might have
vendors?
one?
That remains to be seen, and we'll get into a lot more of that discussion in our next presentation.
Okay.
But yeah,
Great, thank you.
And that maybe is a question that I have for the next presentation, but it's gonna be in there. Was held for 6+ months or off and on, whatnot, but we're still, all of 26 is gonna pass and there's gonna be money all of 27. And I mean, moving ahead is gonna be it's slow, right? We're talking about some of this, the NEVI, all those chargers along 91, and you're looking at 27, 28 before they're actually gonna be functioning.
yep, we are bringing our second one on soon. It's just about ready to go, and then those 8 we anticipate. We'll talk about this more, but we anticipate that those 8 are under road right now will be.
I've been in for 2 or 3 years, and I'm like, is it this slow everywhere in the country to get them done? I mean, I know it's a tough question, but it's gonna be years. It's slow. And it's
We are one of 4 states that have obligated all of our NEVI funds. So there's some states who are a little ahead of us. Pennsylvania got really quickly, but there's not many that are rolling them out that quickly.
Wow.
So
It takes a long time to get the work into the ground and done on this particular program. seems like it's been on here for quite a while. I know it's been controversial. It
It
just,
has been controversial, and the good thing is that we have our funds obligated, so they won't get, it should not get
Taken away from us.
away again. But we should have 8 more sites, which is a lot more than 8 more ports available by the end of this calendar year. And then starting on another, up to 19 locations, we probably will get, we hope we get another at least a dozen or more out of that next solicitation. So seeing more built in 27 and completion in 28.
Representative Burke and then Representative
A
Lau.
quick question. You have a list of all the 8 that are gonna be, yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Hillary will get,
we'll find out.
yes.
Representative Lau.
Andrea, I was just wondering, how many ports does like one location provide? Just, I imagine this is not necessarily a consistent thing, but.
And people really gonna get into that in another.
Oh, yeah.
We have 49 minutes to talk about.
I'm gonna steal the rest.
There really isn't that much more to go through on here, so we want to start early on the other one and roll out, but to answer your question, it's a minimum of 4 per location. Okay, so I know Logan was in, I think yesterday, earlier this week, and had pointed out that there was a 57% increase in our budget. And that is true. The total is 57%. You'll see that the T-Fund is down by 5%. And that increase is really related to the timing of the NEVI projects and the FEMA projects that we've already talked about. I mentioned that last year, the federal funds for NEVI was somewhere around 4.5. And so we're at 9.9 for NEVI this year, just in the federal funds, never mind the matches for that. So big increase there. And then also in that, the FEMA projects last year in our budget only included sort of our oversight cost, which is minimal, it's basically staff time. And then this year, we're looking at the construction cost, so much higher coming through the budget there. And then, of course, there's the local match column is quite a bit higher too, because as the NEVI funds go up that much, the local match goes up that much as well, because they're providing that 20%. So it comes through as a large increase overall, but it only is telling the good story that we are actually getting those projects on the ground.
And your staffing levels and your piece has actually showed less T funds, I guess, so. What's the case on head count or?
Our head count is, you're looking at it.
Pressure.
It says, yeah.
She'll be talking about electric charging.
We had, we staffed up for the IIJA to prepare for that. As you will see and can see here, that we are really on our way to obligation of all of those funds. So we did have 2 limited service positions when we had more staff. So those were intended to help while we get the IIJA funds out. And then we did have 1 other position that is now vacant, and I am still waiting to hear if that's part of the next round. Where we stand. That just means that we're working more closely with other people in the agency to get more support. We have a lot of people that do project management every day of their lives in our agency. And so a lot as we move into implementing these projects, we can get some support from them. So we're working on that with Director of Pitch and Jeremy and Aaron as well. Okay, yeah, so that was the numbers for our budget. I do have a few slides that go into a little bit more detail about the IIJA programs. All of the funds have been, well, all the funds have not been allocated and obligated, but I'll kind of go through how they've been allocated. Yeah, we've received all of the federal fiscal year apportionment, so all 5 years, and then in all 3 programs, and we're well on our way to having almost all of them obligated. We do have for the Protect and the Carbon Reduction Program funds till September of 2029 to obligate those funds. So I know it seems like a long time that we've been taking to get these funds out, but it's actually, we actually do have quite a bit more time to do that. So this is the carbon reduction program, showing the programs and different types of projects that we have allocated CRP funds to. Some of them are already obligated with projects complete, and some right now are just allocations. We're sort of preserving the funds for that, of course, awaiting approval of the budget to make sure that they can go there. So it is subject to some level of change. Just as a reminder of the different areas of eligibility for the funds, we've got these different categories: the transit and micromobility, fleet conversion, bike ped projects, also traffic efficiency projects. Our carbon reduction strategy sort of focused on the first three there, but we had a sketch tool developed for the carbon reduction strategy, and we were seeing that we were getting a little bit more in GHG reductions from some of our traffic efficiency projects, and so we are using some of the funds for that as well. Transit, we are using CRP to supplement services and provided some initial funding for electrification a couple of years ago through T-bill authorizations. The bike ped program through the grant program received just over 2 million on average. I'll just say that for 2024 and 2025. The MTI $3 million was included in the 2024 transportation bill, and we are drawing down on those funds. I think they're about half spent, maybe a little less than half spent thus far. And then again, I mentioned those traffic efficiency projects, looking at projects that like intersection signals that reduce traffic queuing and idling, as well as parking rides where we're contributing to less vehicle miles traveled. So that's the carbon reduction program story. With Protect, let's see, we have all these different projects that we have used Protect funding for. Some, again, are just planned. Some of them are already obligated. Different projects from bridges to culverts. As you understand, most of our design standards are designed to be more resilient. So a lot of our structures already incorporate that. The program really was established to help transportation agencies get to that point. Because of Irene and our updated standards after Irene, we kind of were already there. So those are the projects that some of our Protect funds have gone to. The Resilience Improvement Plan, again, that accounts for that minimum 2% that has to go to support planning. That included the development of the Resilience Improvement Plan, things like broadening the transportation resilience planning tool to rail, and understanding the vulnerabilities in the rail system. Also just improvements to the existing tool that we have and other things, updating repeat damages reports and those kinds of things.
Have a different match for the funding for those bridges, or is it still like 80-20?
No, it's not 80-20. It's a very confusing program with match. There's an 80-20. If it's on the RIP, if it's a project that's identified on the Resilience Improvement Plan, and it's a standalone resilience improvement project, it gets 90-10 straight. If it just has resilience components, but was already going to be done as an asset, it gets 90-10 on the incremental cost for resilience.
So I'm assuming these are the ones that are 90-10 for the fronts we were in.
Some of them are on the RIP, and some of them are not. So there's a mix of matches.
So Andrea, just I'd love a little bit more background on the Protect program. Like, are these projects for climate resiliency that were identified after a weather event, or just kind of identifying this culvert is susceptible, let's upgrade it? Like,
yeah, the program allowed for the development of a resilience implementation plan or improvement plan. And
for the state or for towns?
Well, it was through the federal requirements. It would be a statewide plan. Well, it didn't have a lot of guidelines to go along what needed to be included in that plan, and it wasn't even a requirement that the plan be done. But if you did a plan and identified locations that these dollars could address, that's where that funding split comes in, a higher funding split if it's a project on the plan.
And again, and that plan was to identify vulnerable areas or areas that have already been.
Yeah, we
Some damage.
developed a methodology that looked at the TRPT, the Transportation Resilience Planning Tool, the high scores on that. That looked at transit routes so that vulnerable populations or people without vehicles could still get, we felt like that was a more important route to consider. We looked at the social vulnerability index put out by the Department of Health and factored that into our matrix for scoring. And then came up with a prioritized list of projects.
Okay, so that tool is something that you brought in with IIJA funds.
Mhm.
You're using it to figure out how to deploy them, and then you'll still have the tool going forward, and will that continue to be a tool that you will use in the future?
Yes, I would think so. Who knows what the future holds?
Yeah.
But yeah, it is definitely a tool, a planning tool for, the funds run out, and then the match sort of incentive isn't there anymore. And then I don't know what will happen with reauthorization. Seems to be, resilience is, supported by the current administration. So maybe that will continue to be one of the programs that gets funded. We're not sure.
Thank you.
It's Andrea. Can you just explain the second to last at the bottom, Flexton STBG?
Yep, sorry about that. I forgot to mention that. The program eligibilities, both in the carbon reduction program and the Protect program, allow for certain percentages to be flexed to other programs within the federal highway funds. And so at the early stages, we did flex some of the Protect funds to STBG, and they went to the Richmond culvert and some other various culverts that, our design standards are met for resilience. So they were flexed to STBG, but they still went to resilience projects.
ST, is that state something?
It's the state transportation block grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. So those went to these kind of projects, but sort of a different way. They
Yeah,
were already there and waiting for.
those projects were already there, ready to go, and they took advantage of the flexed funds. And then our last program, there's two federal funding programs that are related to the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Again, we'll talk much more about that, but we have $21 million in the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program through the IIJA to create a network of reliable fast chargers within each state and then across the country. Added to that was $2 million in ARPA funds that got converted to general funds. So we have that available for that as well. Of course, 2025 was very turbulent for this program. Hillary will go into some detail about that. But we obligated, before all of that happened, we had obligated $630,000 to the Bradford project, sort of as a pilot with our new contracting methods. So we kind of had that one out in front. And then a lot happened last year, but we have, everything that happened last year really put the project, the program on pause for almost a year. So when we talk about a delay in projects, fixing the problem that they saw also delayed the projects. We're back on track, and that's good. We are currently deploying $8 million worth of awards made through that first solicitation. So we have 8 locations under contract, and then we have up to another 19 locations that will go into a second solicitation, and we have $13 million left to award to those projects.
The criteria, because we went over it, I think a couple of years ago, saying, hey, they need to be so close to an exit, have facilities nearby, have to be lighted.
Mhm.
All that criteria will stay as we move forward with these.
That's right. Yep.
And will the chargers, the name on the charger may be different as you go to different ones, right? I mean, it could be a
different
charging point or
vendors.
something, yeah.
Right now, we're working with 2 vendors, Ridwelt and Norwich Technologies. We hope and expect that there'll be more vendors in our next solicitation that have interest.
Yeah, I just want to
check, so the blue circles, charge head, what is?
Might I suggest that like all these questions about the NEVI program just be put on hold for our next presentation?
Okay.
We're digging deep in the next one, so, yeah. That's okay. If there's funding questions, happy to answer those, and if not, happy to move on to the NEVI presentation too.
As far as the budget piece goes, there's two of you, the limited impact on transportation funds, shuffling $14 million or more in and out of projects for the next year. So budget wise, it's pretty straightforward, and you're still waiting on whether or not you'll be three or you'll be staying two. That's it for personnel costs and for anything else that's in your budget.
Guys,
That's it.
no program.
Shoveling around $14-15 million
Yes.
in climate related projects. Resiliency, et cetera, and carbon mitigation funds and NEVI funds and protect funds and the whole list.
Yeah.
So spent a lot of time in requirements and filling out, and making sure the money is flow correctly. Huh?
Yep, we have had staff sitting in on, both the bike head grants, the MTI grants. So making sure that the funds that go to those projects are, eligible activities. Yep.
Anybody else have any questions about budget or about thought? I think there's a lot of interest in what you're gonna do next. Thank you very much for that.
Gabriella, is it okay if I just stay on the same link?
Yeah.
Is it the same link?
Yeah, same thing, yeah.
Okay. Do this next one up.
Take a breath.
Larry, do you want to pull your chair up here since you're covering a good portion of this one?
Welcome to the hot seat.
Oh, thank you. Register this one. Yeah. Sure, let's do that. Oh, man, still be long sleeve. The paper tape.
Getting slow internet on the website?
Was yesterday.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bit slow.
So, let's see.
Matches my brother.
Did she say slow? Me too.
I couldn't,
Okay, thought it was
I
mine.
couldn't get on a meeting before this.
Yeah.
Okay. That was mine.
Just immediately go to the next page.
I probably did. It's all my fault.
That's very slow, and then I can't.
Yay.
Bring it up. I had to go.
I'm scheduled till 2, but we wanna, we're ready to go, we'll just keep going.
Think we would want to keep going if that's okay with you. If you want a break, we can get one.
Ask all our questions, I've never.
Hillary's been like turning her brain quickly.
Did you write all this down, Hillary?
You can add herding cats to your resume.
It's already there. Yeah, really. Okay, well, hello again. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Andrea Wright, and I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at VTrans, overseeing the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Program that oversees the NEVI National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Here with Hillary Delross, she's our Sustainability and Innovations Project Manager, and also considered our NEVI Program Manager. So again, here to provide an overview of our annual report that was submitted on January 15th. Thereabouts, and may have been posted a little bit later than that. But. So I'm just going to go through some background slides, and then Hillary will dig into the meat of sort of what's been going on for the last couple of years as we get this program up and running and see some progress. So as a quick reminder, as is included under 19 VSA 2907, the agency is required to file a report with a map showing our progress on developing charging infrastructure, both in accordance with our National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan required under the NEVI program, and also in meeting the state goals that are laid out in statute. Also in the 2024 T-bill, it requires a written plan for projecting the funding needs for charging infrastructure that would be needed to meet the Comprehensive Energy Plan and the Climate Action Plan targets that were included for that plan, the modeling that was done for that plan. So we have also provided it in this current year's report. Again, quick reminder of the goals, 19 VSA 2906, as amended by the 2024 Transportation Bill. The goal for electric vehicle charging infrastructure is to have a level 3 charging port available to the public within 3 miles of every exit of the interstate system and within 25 miles of another level 3 charging port along state highways. Representative Fauci mentioned this in the last presentation, but they also need to be co-located within a safe distance, both for walking and rolling, to publicly accessible amenities, bathrooms, have good lighting, again, has to be accessible. So those are the goals that were laid out in statute. Okay, so as you know, in 2020, the legislature passed Act 153. It's the Global Warming Solutions Act, and that created legally binding emission reduction requirements. It required the creation of the Vermont Climate Council and the development of the Climate Action Plan. Some significance in that is that one of the first actions of the Vermont Climate Council was to recommend sectoral proportionality. And so at that time, the greenhouse gas inventory said that transportation was responsible for 40% of the emissions, and that transportation sector needed to be responsible for 40% of the reductions. The Climate Council was charged with creating the Climate Action Plan. They did that through the establishment of a variety of different subcommittees, and those subcommittees were charged with developing pathways, strategies, and actions to address emissions reductions, resilience, and carbon sequestration, all of these that were defined as focus areas for the council. So the initial Climate Action Plan was approved in December of 2021. At that point, the Comprehensive Energy Plan was up for renewal. That plan is also largely speaking to the Global Warming Solutions Act requirements, has more of an energy focus, but there is real overlap in both of the plans under the transportation pathways, strategies, and actions. The Climate Action Plan has a renewal requirement of every 4 years. And so that was updated in 2025. And the Comprehensive Energy Plan is every 6 years. The last one being 2022. It's up for renewal for 2028. And the Public Service Department is really starting to do engagement and outreach on that plan. So we will certainly be involved in the update of that as well. So listed here are the transportation strategies and actions that relate to vehicle electrification. I've listed those because that's what we're here to talk about today. But the plans also list other transportation pathways and actions related to cleaner vehicles, different fuel types, supporting different land use patterns and transportation demand management strategies and transportation choices. Also actions around joining a Cap and Invest program when one is available. But again, we're here to talk about these relevant actions today. So you've probably seen this slide. I think it's important just to kind of ground everybody again for the conversation. And we just want to really provide an overview and lay the foundation for what a charging network includes. We need to have enough charging infrastructure in place so drivers feel confident that they can get where they want to and need to go, that they can get the charge where they are and get at the right level. So we need to think about different needs at different locations, as well as the associated costs at those different locations. Obviously, you've heard a lot about charging in the last few years. There's different levels of charging, and there's best use cases for different locations. And each of these comes with substantially different price tags. So you're in the $1,000 range for level 2, thousands of dollars for level 2, where it's hundreds of thousands for level 3, and it goes up higher depending on how fast that level 3 charger is. So the agency, of course, is charged with deploying that fast charging along the highway corridors, but the legislature has also supported charging at multi-unit dwellings, at workplaces, and within communities. We have to find that balance and use case with the costs. And Hillary will definitely get into a lot more about how our planning and our solicitations incorporate that towards the end of the presentation. So while we are sort of in this electric vehicle transition for the overall state fleet, we can't expect that the private sector is going to rise to the occasion and fully meet the need. And so we have public investments really to serve as a catalyst until we're at a point where the private development will take over. Vermont has invested state funds for quite a long time. We started pretty early in 2014. In 2017, there was $2.8 million through the Volkswagen settlement funds, state funds, and they were made available to ACCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, administered those funds with support from the interagency working group. And that was for the deployment of both level 2 and level 3 forts. And then in 2021, the Vermont legislature provided $1 million for ACCD to pilot a program for installation of charging equipment at multi-unit dwellings. And then the following year in 22, authorized another $10 million in state funds for additional multi-unit dwellings, workplace, and community attractions charging. And that was the Vermont Charge Vermont program. And then, of course, I mentioned in the last presentation, we have our federal funding through the NEVI program, where AOT will deploy $21 million. It's supplemented with $2 million in the ARPA, now converted to general fund. And that's for charging along the highway network with the private investment as the match. And then this map on the right is from ACCD's website and just shows the locations and levels of charging from the Charge Vermont program. And then the other picture there is just in support of the fact that Vermont has the highest number of public chargers per capita in the US. And Vermont scored the highest on the Natural Resources Defense Council State Transportation Scorecard for vehicle electrification in 2025. It was based on 2024 data, but that was for our clean transportation incentives and highest number of public charging per capita. So that's an interesting place if you go to that. There's some good information there. And now I will transition to Hillary so she can give you some more detail on the NEVI funds and our deployment plan. Yeah. Yeah.
You're here, come on.
Oh.
All right. So I'm Hillary Delross. I'm the Sustainability and Innovations Project Manager for the agency. been managing the NEVI program the last couple of years. So I know everyone's excited to dig into the details of the program. Just to lay the framework here, first we'll get into where we are now with the NEVI program throughout kind of the ups and downs of the last couple of years. Then we'll go into how NEVI fits with the broader public charging network. So this map highlights the 9 NEVI projects we currently have under contract after our first solicitation. Our first priority was to build out the corridor network. This is in response to the previous administration's guidelines for the program, which required that chargers be located every 50 miles along the alternative fuel corridors and within 1 mile of the corridor exits. The minimum requirements also included that each location have a minimum of 4 ports that can charge 150 kilowatt hour simultaneously. These targets were to be met before any of the remaining funds could be used off of the corridors into community locations. And our NEVI plans called for 15 priority locations to meet that 50-mile increment. Our first NEVI compliant site in Bradford was completed April 24. That was, like Andrea mentioned earlier, that was through a sole source contract to upgrade existing installation of several lower powered chargers that were funded through the ACCD's program. The remaining 14 locations were included in our first solicitation. Out of those 14, we got 11 awards made by the end of 2024. That was right before the program's disruption started following January. By the time we,
Can you, so there were 11 more that you added, and how many bids did you get from different, was it just the 2 port companies that are bidding, or?
That's a good question. So we did a 2-part solicitation process. The first was to pre-qualify vendors. We had 8 vendors who ultimately were shortlisted. We received bids from 6 of those vendors. We awarded projects to 4 of those vendors. And then throughout the duration of last year, we had 2 vendors who actually declined their awards. One of those projects that were declined, we were able to award to another vendor who had also had a competitive bid at the time. And then one of those projects will be added to the next solicitation. I'll kind of go into those.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
So, okay, after Bradford was open, and we had these remaining 8 that we expect to be open for business by the end of this calendar year. And you can see that leaves some significant gaps along our alternative fuel corridors. We didn't receive competitive bids for Derby, St. Johnsbury, or Springfield. So that's the reason why those weren't initially awarded. We expect to include those again in the next solicitation. Site hosts in Manchester and Rutland couldn't be secured with the timing to be able to take advantage of the federal tax credits before they were sunset. So those awards didn't move forward. And then there was a project in Berlin that didn't move forward because it was a Canadian company who was awarded that project, who had set up shop in the US. And during last year's federal changes, they've shifted their focus to just Canadian projects. So we lost that one as well. But all of those sites we plan to include in the next RFP. So our approach in the first RFP was to balance the goal of fully building out the AFC network to the minimum standards, and then directing any funds that were remaining after that into community charging, or to filling gaps along the alternative fuel corridors in those 25-mile increments to meet state goals. The NEVI guidelines have since been revised in the fall to allow states greater discretion to determine what fully built out looks like for their state. We requested and received certification as fully built out based on these 9 active contracts. So now we have greater flexibility in how we deploy these funds in the next RFP. And what that looks like, for example, is projects along the corridors will still be required to have the 4 150 kilowatt fast power ports. But locations outside of the corridors can have a combination of equipment. They could do the 4 fast ports, they could do a combination of fast and level 2 ports, or just level 2. So that should hopefully help to allow for right-sized equipment to be deployed in some of these areas where we're having trouble filling the gaps.
Sure.
You're up.
Thank you. Hillary, would you mind repeating what you just said about the second segment will be able to deploy either level 3 or level 2?
Yeah, so we'll have some more flexibility.
So this
in
is
the-
after the 8 are fully
Right,
in the ground, then the next group can be level 2 or level 3?
well, we used these first 9 contracted projects to request fully built out certification from FHWA. They approved that request, which means now we don't have to continue to build these fast powered stations in areas where we didn't get bids in the first round. We don't have to do that before we spend the rest of the funds. So we have flexibility to include those locations and also open it up to other configurations and other locations that are outside of the corridors. So if there's, beyond the 1 mile from corridor exit, if we have a downtown that's interested but isn't able to put in 4 fast ports for some reason, we have a little flexibility on what that configuration could look like there. So we are hoping that we'll see vendors submit bids in this next solicitation for sites that are in some of these areas where we're seeing bigger gaps because they're not forced into that example.
I mean, just, I hear you all sharing that Vermont is looking really good nationally in terms of electric vehicle charging stations per capita. But I would also just point out, and this is not news to you, that level 3s are really where we're lacking. So we have a lot of level 2s around the state, and when people are traveling distances, they really need the level 3. So I just want to kind of make a comment that I still think the priority should be on level 3s versus level 2s.
And we'll look at some maps here on the next slide and the one after that too, that show a heat map of the state and where we're lacking fast charging. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in those 2 things.
Representative Forrest?
So, federally designated EV corridors. So the federal government designated these, or did we suggest these corridors?
I believe that we applied for designation for these
For these
corridors.
particular corridors? Okay, because I know that western half of the state, Route 22, there's like nothing. And there's a lot of traffic that comes over on Route 4 from 149 in New York State over on 4, and they get off that first exit and travel more so. So that's just my one comment. And the next one, these are all, only one of these is operational right now.
Right.
Correct, okay. And did you tell us the time frame of the rest of the?
The rest
Within
of
the
these
next-
8 should be operational by the end of this calendar year, by
By the
December.
end of this calendar year?
In some student.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be kind of a waterfall. They're not all gonna come online at the same time in
Yeah.
December.
What level are these?
They're all fast charging.
All fast
They're
charging?
all at least 150 kilowatt.
Okay, so that's level 2 or 3?
3.
Three. Oh, they are all level 3s.
It's pretty fast.
Okay, so I'm sure you have a map of, because I know Rutland has a whole slew of Tesla chargers right at the Stewarts there. I think they're fast chargers. Do you have a map of the whole state where all chargers are? No.
Yeah, we'll look at that in just a moment.
Okay.
And I don't know, I may have missed this sentence earlier, but we did award a project in Rutland.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of the projects that was foregone by the vendor because they were having difficulty securing a site host location within the census tract that would qualify that project for federal tax credit before we got to a point where, looking at the project construction schedule, that they knew that they couldn't get it done and figure out an operational in time. So,
Thank you.
that will be revisited in the next
Yeah,
year.
just the western part of the state is lacking in chargers. Just saying that right now, so.
Yeah, that tax credit that vendors were encouraged and did use that as part of their match, and with that sunsetting. The picture further.
Yeah.
Well, remember, so we're looking at a map here of our initial, you can see where the gaps are, but this is part of our initial 15 prioritized locations that were on, I believe, 6 or 7 roadways. And those were our designated corridors. So when we look at our next RFP, we'll be able to look beyond these corridors to be able to fill in where we have gaps.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Do you actually know the locations yet of those 9 or not? It's just-
Yes, these all are all contracted for bids that we received for a specific site. So our vendors right now are finalizing their site host agreements with those property owners.
So that's not public yet. Because-
So we haven't been broadcasting the addresses for these, just because those negotiations.
Tell me offline, but-
Yeah.
All still within the federally designated EV corridor.
Correct.
Okay.
For this round, yep,
For this round that you're.
exactly. You're welcome. So actually, the conversation about connecting with the site host kind of leads into the next piece I was going to touch on, which is securing the site hosts. Properties that are viable, qualified, and interested in participating has been one of the bigger challenges that we've seen, and one of the bottlenecks. After we get the projects under contract, there is a time span that we allow for the site host to work with our vendors to actually execute an agreement. And we receive a copy of those agreements to make sure that they meet all of the different criteria for amenities and snow removal and things like that, to make sure there's a consistent experience at each of these locations. So we are working with Drive Electric Vermont right now to put together some educational materials for prospective site hosts. These could be private business property owners, municipalities, and we'll work with the RPCs and the energy planners at the RPCs to kind of get this information out. So we can start building up a list of interested parties and make those connections with our shortlisted bidders going into the next RFP, and help to close that time lag a little bit in our contracting, which will get these projects a little bit quicker.
Are gas stations ever interested in being a host? Is there any problem with them being a host if they were interested, or?
We did, I think we did receive a bid that was like a general store with gas station. I think, so not many. But this is essentially, we're infusing a private party to install, own, and operate this equipment, at least for a period of 5 years. Our contracts have an operations and maintenance requirement of 5 years, and that includes making sure these have at least 97% uptime during that period. If anything goes down, that the company is responsive, and there's reporting, quarterly and annual reporting that's involved throughout that duration, so we can track the outages and the uptime. And because there is another party, I think that may be where it might not fit in with the business model for both of those entities.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, it's so important to get somebody who's gonna maintain. Because like, for instance, there's a level 2 out there on Beacon Avenue that's not functioning right now. I mean, BGS knows about it, but.
Right, I'm not sure that they had a maintenance contract with the company that installed it. And that, I think, is a precedent that this program set and was part of the intentions behind its creation, was to be able to provide a consistent and reliable experience really across the nation in these 50-mile increments on alternative fuel corridors. And so that's where they built in this 5-year O&M period.
What in the contract, the requirements, as far as the pricing, you know, the long-term pricing and methods of payment, and are those all built into these contracts that, so for example, can I use a credit card at each one of these?
Yes, each of the NEVI contracts has a requirement that a credit card reader be included in.
And then the pricing,
The pricing, so as with part of the bids, when we're reviewing, before we award any contracts, there is a price that the bidder proposes, a kilowatt hour price. So when we make the award, we're awarding that price unless we've had a negotiation. And there is a mechanism if a company needs to raise or lower a price that they can do that only up to consumer price index rate of inflation
from that.
for the duration of their contract period, which is the 5 years of operations.
And are they required to post the price on the charger?
Yes, that's all made available before
Great.
somebody starts the charging.
Thanks.
Representative Webb?
You said there were some bids out like in Derby. What did their bid lack? They didn't get awarded one of these options for chargers. What would they, where were they short?
I would have to go back and look at the bids that came in originally, because now we're talking a couple of years ago, a lot of details to remember. I don't believe that we got any bids for Derby.
That's my.
Right.
Okay.
I think for St. Johnsbury, we had one bid. It ended up not, I believe it was something with the site host, it wasn't a reasonable location.
Okay.
And then for Springfield, we also did not get a bid.
So the pricing, getting back just to ask an additional question, the consumer price index fluctuates yearly. They can adjust yearly for the first 5 years, or based on inflation, or is it just a one-time thing?
It's not, it hasn't been a one-time thing yet. It hasn't been more than a one-time thing yet. We've only had one request come in
Oh, to increase the price?
to increase the
because of-
price, yes.
Okay.
Essentially, now we're looking at bids that we reviewed 2 years ago. And this location has been in operation for 2 years, and costs have changed significantly for their costs of power, equipment,
Yes.
maintenance, et cetera.
Right.
So that's where that request came from.
Okay, so could it be a possibility that somebody comes back yearly to increase their price?
I imagine
They could.
Yeah.
Up to the first 5 years, and then what happens after the 5th year?
so. After the 5th year, they are
Yeah.
no longer receiving an incentive, and their contracts are expired with us. So the idea was these contracts are called DBOOM, design, build, own, operate, and maintain. And that is all the responsibility that the private sector companies are taking on. So the state doesn't own the projects. After that 5 years, they are going to be owned and hopefully continue operating and maintained by the private parties that install them.
Okay, so you pretty much kind of regulate kind of for the first 5 years, and after that, it's whatever that owner feels is the rate that they need to put on their pump in
Yep.
order to survive.
Exactly.
They
Yeah,
can-
the
Okay.
program is really designed to be an infusion of public funds to help bolster this industry while we're in this period of transition before there's enough EV drivers on the road and enough demand to make a business case for a private entity doing 100% of the investments.
That's, I mean, that's what my concern was, what if the consumer price index is huge and they're only allowed a one-time deal on it, but as long as they can come back and say, hey, this is costing me money now.
Right. We just don't want them to go beyond inflation
Correct.
during the time that they're
I
under
understand.
contract.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's move on to the next scene. All right, so this now is a snapshot in time. Where does NEVI fall in the bigger picture of the statewide fast charging network? So we're looking at, I just pulled up the numbers yesterday on the alternative fuels data center, station locator, which indicates we have 97 fast charging stations with 281 ports right now. And if you look at the heat map here, you can see where currently available fast chargers are and the gaps in meeting the state goal to have them every 25 miles of the next.
Do these include Tesla?
I will get into Tesla in a moment. This includes some Tesla, skip
The
ahead.
ones that can be, so some Tesla chargers can be used by other people in some
Correct.
ways.
Yeah, so the ones that cannot are not included on this
Okay.
map.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So what?
Hillary, is there a map that the public can access so that they can see where the fast chargers are?
Yes, several options. So the Alternative Fuels Data Center, it's a tool set up by the Department of DOE. It includes a station locator. All of our publicly funded public chargers have to be added to that map before they're operational or as they're becoming operational.
And that's a federal map? Okay, and
Alternative fuel data center.
That's right, AFDC. There's a plethora of data and information on that website, but the two tools that we use most often are the station locator. And also there's a EV charging needs assessment tool. We'll look at that in a minute. Another map that shows where all the fast charging is, all charging is, but can be filtered by fast charging is PlugShare. And that,
yep, and I'm familiar with that, and that's, I find it somewhat reliable, but not entirely, yeah.
so the thing with the AFDC map is that it doesn't show like real-time status of use or that granular level of detail, where PlugShare has a function where users can upload their experience there.
I'm not advocating one way or the other, but will there be signage on to show people where if they're cruising down the highway, like, oh, this exit has a charger and a gas station and something else?
Short answer is yes, but all of the NEVI locations will follow the MUTCD standards for signage. There was recently an update where only fast charging signage could be displayed on highways. And so we will work with our contractors to make sure they're in touch with the right people to get all the signs up. So that'll be, on highway signage where appropriate, and then directional signage once you get off the highway.
Great, thank you.
So just to quickly recap again on this map, the darkest orange areas, which are around all four borders, right on the borders, and then we can see more of that space in the northern part of the state. These are areas where people would find themselves currently more than 25 miles from the nearest charger. In those areas, I believe it's 50 miles in between the nearest fast charger. Or, yes.
Even meter
Yeah,
in those areas.
don't really need one.
So I was going to go through.
Some places I wouldn't have expected such a gap. Like the one you pointed out earlier, but from Middlebury to Rutland and whatnot are pretty heavily traveled and.
I can't buy an electric car.
It's options too, you know, it's
Route 7.
Well,
right
there was a
down
stop charger in Middlebury, actually.
And I think this is an evaluation of within our borders too. So we're working with Drive Electric Vermont to look outside of our borders too. So that could play into the dark area around the perimeter, right?
Yeah, so we're really just looking at chargers in Vermont.
Yeah. So there could be a charger 10 miles away in New York, but it's not showing as
We
a,
haven't done that mapping exercise yet.
I know.
So just moving along, this is where we are headed. So when we factor in all of our currently planned but not yet contracted projects and our contracted projects, that's both NEVI projects and ACD's Charge Vermont projects. This is what the map becomes. So it narrows some of those gaps in some places where you can see there's still a gap, but it narrows it down closer to 35 versus the 50-mile increments. So we know even with the funds that we have available to continue and finish deploying, that there will still be a need to fill those gaps after. Okay, now this is a look at similar information, but in numbers instead of the visual map. Again, this is kind of a glimpse. If you can see the screenshot in the background there, that is the US DOE's daily charging needs tool, which is available on the AFDC website. I'm going to review the current need assessment in a moment, but first just want to make a note on the numbers that we're showing here. So again, this is assessment of whether we have enough charging to meet the needs of our current fleet. And the numbers that we included in our legislative report were based on the most recent EV registration data that we had at the time. That data is included here on the slide as well, so that there's some consistency if you want to look back and forth to check some more detail. But we did get updated numbers yesterday for Q4. The increase in registrations, the previous quarter was only 535. So that reflects the slowest growth in EV registrations since June 2023, which I don't think was surprising given the federal tax credits for incentive purchasing these ended in Q3. So what we're looking at here, the AFDC calculations for public charging ports needed to support the current fleet. We have to input certain assumptions into the tool before we can run our calculation. One of those assumptions is how many drivers have access to home charging. So we assume 71%, that is the current housing stock of single family homes. So those would be the homes where they would have the easiest and most accessible time to get home charging installed. Doesn't include multi-unit dwellings or folks who are in single family homes. The other assumption that we insert here is the percentage of EVs that are plug-in hybrids. So in this case, using October's numbers, that's 39%. Those are not included in the charging demand estimates because most plug-in hybrid drivers can meet their daily mileage needs without having to stop and charge while they're away from home. So they're relying on their home charging. So currently, if we're looking at DC fast charge line, the number of ports needed, 178. All of the ports that either are currently operational or planned totals 431 fast charging ports. So we can see that what we have planned currently exceeds what our needs are.
Thanks. And so this doesn't, because when I look at the fast charging NEVI network on the highways, I mean, sure, that could be me or anybody, driving around, have to go to Brattleboro or something. But I look at it as for tourism. And so that isn't part of this.
Right.
So you'd want it to be more than the minimum needed because, there's a lot of folks, particularly coming from Canada, based on my experience with electric charging needs.
That's right. We're just doing this calculation based on our state fleet.
And what do the numbers look like if you adjusted like that 71% for the households? Like, did you play with that number? Does it drastically change if you go down to like 50 years?
Yes, and so that's our next
Oh, that's
slide
nice.
here. So perfect timing. So when we run these scenarios. When we rerun this scenario with a higher number of drivers with access to home charging, you can see here, scenario 1, I highlighted the gap there of 134 fast chargers. Sorry, let me back up 1 second. These scenarios are run based on what our needs will be if our fleet reaches 126,000 EVs by 2023, which is our goal from the Vermont Pathways 2.0 analysis. 2030, thank you. So we can see that gap, after we account for all of our NEVI funding and our Charge Vermont funding, we have 134 fast charging ports that we need. If we increase the assumption of how many drivers have access to home charging, so that's folks who could charge in their single family homes and multi-unit dwellings, we use this number 87%, you can see that number drops significantly to a positive 18. So showing that we have 18 more ports than what the minimum requirement would be to fuel those vehicles. This is the last slide. So if we're looking at that gap of 134 fast charging ports and we apply today's total cost per port, this is based on an average of all of our contracts that we have in place right now. It's $250 total cost per port. So that's both the federal incentive and the private match combined there. That's a $33.5 million gap to meet that need. So we know that likely the public sector is not going to 100% fill that need. And we expect that as EV drivers increase and technology changes, that the private sector will continue to invest in charging. I think it is the timing of that is dependent on a lot of factors right now. And so that's where the public investment to get us to where we are has, yes, been very
This, you know, I think important for us to sort of understand how we're doing. But really up until NEVI and some state sort of funding, it's all been private.
right.
And I'm driving around plugging into private things. So, I mean, I'm feeling like this sort of surge of, you know, filling out the blanks as much as you can, and that I would assume the private would begin to, you know, take over because they've been there from the start, really just testing the waters, I'm guessing. What information do you have as far as sort of long range in the next 5 or 10 years? Have these public, private fast charge businesses, have they been successful, or are they like, this isn't working out, or we're getting out of this business, or we're going all in?
I think a combination of all of the above. There's been a lot of fluctuation in the market. I think that when NEVI was created, there was a lot of excitement and a lot of ramping up, and things may be tapered down a bit as far as excitement goes. And the business case for every single charging station is going to be different, especially in the case of matching up a vendor who doesn't own the property and is working with the site host, and you know, the geography, the number of drivers in that region or driving through that region, the availability of three-phase power and the cost of upgrading electrical equipment, networking availability. So access to a cell signal in some of these places are a little more challenging. So I think all of these things combined are taken into account for every single unique charging station situation.
Yeah, so just as a sideline here, Matt Koda has said that fast chargers are being put in facilities that are being built from the ground up. And so you put a whole new facility in, and because you have that ability to plan for such things, that he knows of 3 that were built in the last year that included chargers. And the nice thing about that is they can sit there and charge and then go sit in their nice, in a spot in the facility. Yeah, in the facility.
News stories of.
What's
You
that?
said facilities, you mean convenience stores is what you're?
Well, it's even more than that. If you think of, yes, convenience stores. But if you think of what is at Stewart's in Rutland on Woodstock Avenue, that's the type of thing. So it's that incremental cost it seems to be very doable if you're going to spend $3 million on a facility with tanks and convenience stores and such.
Yeah, so I'm curious about the Bradford location, which is the one that is up and running. Have you all been there, used it as an EV chart customer? Just curious.
We've gone to the site, but I don't have any.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, so I would just share, and I think I shared some feedback with maybe the secretary this summer, but I did visit it and kind of really difficult time. Because it doesn't provide shade and you needed to download an app and you couldn't, there's poor cell service there, there's no shade, so it's really difficult to use your phone to scan the QR code. I found it really, really frustrating. I did return, was kind of going to New Hampshire, came back Sunday, had a better experience. It was an overcast day, but I'm just sharing that, and I'm happy to dig up my email and just give you the blow by blow in terms of the customer experience, because I think, and I didn't recognize the brand name that was established there. I mean, Electrify America is a great brand that is really reliable. I don't know if they work with individual, private companies. ChargePoint is also a really reliable brand, and I think they do work with private companies. So I mean, just something to think about that as you're working through installing these chargers, which I think is really important for Vermont. But just thinking about the customer service experience and consistency, being able to use a credit card versus having to download an app, like those are all really important considerations, particularly if people are traveling or on any, you already have to kind of slow down in terms of your schedule when you're driving an EV, but to also have some of these other impacts, it can be a difficult experience.
It's great feedback. I think a lot of what you just mentioned, we do include in our contracts. And so to be able to see how that reveals itself in real time and it really is their experiences. Something that we can actually tweak a little bit in the language that we use moving forward. Right.
So I guess
You're good.
first, okay. So with Nevi's chargers that you're installing, people contracted. So say I own a convenience store in a location and I want to have a charging station at the convenience store. Do they contract with the state through this NEVI program, or how does this, I mean, is it another private company that's going to come on their private property?
That's right.
To actually, so it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. This ChargePoint, I'm just going to use ChargePoint as an example, comes in on my convenience store, places their charging station on my plot of land, and my guess is that I'm going to get business because they have to sit there for 20 minutes to a half an hour while they charge, and they'll come into my store and purchase.
That's the
So
idea.
really, so is ChargePoint doing everything with you for the NEVI thing? It's simply the owner of the convenience store is saying, yes, I'm allowing this.
Yes, so for NEVI in particular,
Yes.
our contracts are with our pre-qualified vendors who are the entity that's going to own and operate and maintain and install and design the charging station. They are connecting with property owners. So for our first RFP, we knew we had these 15, we'll just say towns that were on the interstate, that on the AFCs that we needed to get built out. So in those towns or in a radius around the exits in those locations, our vendors worked with different site hosts, talked to different property owners about who was interested in having charging on their property. They then develop a site host agreement between the two of them, and that outlines what that relationship is gonna be.
Did
So
you get involved in that?
we mostly not.
Okay.
Mostly that is the relationship that they have agreed upon themselves. There are criteria that the NEVI program requires, like it has to be safe, lit,
Yeah.
access to amenities, bathrooms, walkable. If we're walking down roads, you know, we want to see sidewalks if available. There is one piece that the state does get involved with outside of making sure the agreements have those items. And that is a conditional assignment of lease. That is to ensure that if for any reason, the vendors that we have under contract and have made this agreement with the property owner default, it is an emerging market, that instead of the equipment or the construction of the project being a stranded asset, that the state would then go back to our pre-qualified list of vendors, put that project out, see who is available and interested in taking it on, and then they would assume that project and complete it, own it, operate it, maintain it for the duration of that 5-year requirement. So that's really the only piece where we get involved, and that's just to make sure that these assets are.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, it sounds like the problem is getting owners of sites to want to do this. Are you looking into what might be some of the barriers as they perceive them, or what's it sounds like something in this is just not, they're looking at it and kind of going, not interested. I'm just sort of wondering if we could dig a bit more into that, if we really want this to work. Alternatively, we think beyond NEVI and even the reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act, which we have no idea what that's going to look like, and what the provisions will be in it in terms of what would a Vermont specific model for this look like. I mean, I'm scratching my head as to why there is not, I mean, you see these things called Buc-ee's, never seen one in real life myself, but my son loves them. They're all over the South and they have tons of these things. I mean, it's whatever you need. And they're, wildly popular. And, I'm not suggesting, that this would be perfect fit with Vermont, but just kind of wondering what we could do to just get more information about, like, why is there not more uptake of this?
And that's exactly what we're trying to work on before we release the next RFP. So starting to develop some of those relationships with potential site hosts, have the initial conversations with the contractors so they can understand what their requirements are going to be. And then they can work through some of those, or we can look at what a strong bid might look like for that area. And this gets back into, is it having more flexibility in the configuration of the size of the equipment? In some instances, there could be a really interested site host that's in a location that just doesn't have existing access to 3-phase power. Or in the first RFP, where it was beyond the 1 mile radius from the alternative fuel corridor, which was part of the requirements there. And so, not being further away from the alternative fuel corridor in this first round created another step in the process for us to request an exception. So that could have been a deterrent. And that could have been something where the site host was really enthusiastic, but then the vendor who was interested in bidding on that area couldn't make it work as a business case.
So many variables.
Right.
But it sounds like there is a process where you could, I guess, put to the NEVI folks, ask for an exception, something to make it a little more right sized to our limitations.
Yeah, in the first RFP, the first round under the original guidance, there was that requirement to have them every 50 miles along the AFC and within 1 mile of the exit. So in Vermont, some locations don't have a viable site host within that 1 mile. And we really wanted to see more of these be closer to downtowns and villages so that it's drawing business into our towns. And there was a allowance where we could request the exception. And we did that for, I believe, 6 sites to be either just beyond the mile, or we'll use Randolph for an example. That was our biggest exception. That was 3 miles. So that now we have a station going in the downtown.
Yes.
Sorry, can I just clarify one more thing too? This next round of funding, now that we have received our fully built out certification, means that we have flexibility to decide where these go. So this is where we hope and expect that we'll have a little bit bigger response in our RFP for areas that maybe weren't as desirable in that first round because of those limitations, where those don't exist in the second round.
The last question I just wanted to ask is interest among municipalities for hosting these, and whether or not the LCT might be some kind of a partner to just help things along.
Absolutely. There is interest in municipalities. We have contracts where they're going in on municipal property. And so, yes, once we get our educational materials ready for potential site hosts, we'll be sharing that with partners like the RPCs and the VLCT.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so for following up on that, where did you advertise the bids? Where did they go out to?
So because we did the 2-part solicitation process, we have our short list of 8 bidders. We will, once the RFP is written, we will, I believe, send that directly to them, invite them to bid. We're also going to build in a mechanism into this next RFP, or we're planning to, so that we can on-ramp any additional vendors who are interested in being shortlisted, who maybe were in operation at the time or who weren't interested in Vermont at the time when we did that pre-qualification process, where they could both submit a bid for a project and submit all of their statement of qualifications.
I guess I was thinking more about, like, is there a way to send out something to potential hosts? That a host might then say, oh, I'd like to partner with a vendor or
Yes.
something, like coffee shops and restaurants and like downtowns, as we were just talking about, but, which could be beneficial to their business.
Yes, we are planning on doing some outreach before the RFP. So we'll share some of the answers to some of the common questions that we're seeing from site hosts. And we'll work with municipalities so that they can share that information around with the businesses in their town.
I thought you had it covered.
We'll also do, once this is ready, I'm sure we'll share it out through AOT channels, through our newsletter, and through social and press release.
Grocers Association.
That's all we had prepared.
So you're asking for $33.5 million over the next 6 years, 4 years?
I think.
Where have I heard that before? He's ignoring rate.
That's the prediction. So prediction
Yeah,
using.
by 2030.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very funny. Thank you.
We are adjourned until tomorrow.